Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Hello and welcome to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Cynthia, and I cannot believe we are 2 days away from Christmas. Oh my goodness. If you guys are like me, I waited till the very last second to do my Christmas shopping, which is what I've been handling over the weekend. I went to the mall, horrible decision by the way, yesterday with my brother. And it was so crazy, so jam-packed. It was insane. Way too many people, way too many strollers, which is why I also don't like Disneyland. Whole other topic right there. But anyways, I don't do well with large crowds. I don't like being in crowded situations. And yeah, I hope you guys didn't wait till the very last second like I did to do all your last minute Christmas shopping. Let me know in the comments if you're a procrastinator like I am, which I feel like a lot of people are, by the way. And I learned my lesson. Next year, I'm for sure opting for online shopping. Way easier and way more accessible. Way better deals, by the way. There's just so many pros to online shopping. But anyway, we're not going to get into all that today. What I do want to talk about is highly relatable to the holiday season. It has to do with mental illness, especially with this time of year. This is the time of year, although we're supposed to be all jolly and happy and in high spirits, a lot of people are feeling down, are feeling depressed, do have some type of anxiety, which is all what we'll be discussing today, but more specifically, anxiety disorders. So I feel like it was very appropriate to talk about this during this week's episode, since we are a couple short days away from Christmas. Oh my God, that's crazy. Anyways, so anxiety, right? I feel the normal average person, we've all experienced some type of anxiety. So occasional anxiety, of course, it's an expected part of life. You might feel anxious when, let's say, you're faced with a problem at work or before taking a test, which is called test anxiety, or before making a big life-changing decision. I know I used to feel a lot of anxiety when I was in college before taking tests. And also when I used to be a cheerleader, I used to experience tremendous anxiety before hitting the mat for a cheer competition. However, those are very normal and temporary feelings of fear and worry, and mine tend to go away. But unfortunately for others, for many other individuals who suffer from some type or some form of anxiety disorder, that anxiety and that fear and that worry does not go away. It can actually get worse over time. And I'm going to throw here a couple interesting facts and shocking numbers. Indeed. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States, affecting around 40 million adults in the U.S. ages 18 and older. And that's a very high number. And what's even more alarming is that these people who experience some form of anxiety disorder, although they're highly treatable, it's around almost 37% of those suffering some type of anxiety disorder don't receive any treatment. And I feel like a lot of it is because we downplay mental illness. We downplay how people are feeling. If someone comes to you and they're experiencing negative thoughts, a lot of times if you're like in my position, who thank God I don't have any type of mental illness, you probably can't really understand or grasp what that other person is feeling, what that constant fear or that constant worry feels like. I know my mom she's also diagnosed with anxiety, and this was in large due to also being diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which I talk about it in a previous episode, all dedicated to fibromyalgia, if y'all want to go listen to that. And a lot of times people who have anxiety, it's correlated with another mental illness or another physical limitation or inability. So it's all kind of intertwined. And I know my mom, when I'm going to first quickly mention here a little bit of her experience with anxiety, she tends to focus a lot on the future. And again, this is not people with anxiety. I want people to understand, if you're someone like me who doesn't experience some type of anxiety, normal anxiety, right? I experience normal anxiety, but I'm talking a real disorder. If you try to put yourself in their shoes, right? Don't try to downplay what that other person is feeling. And it took a while, honestly, for my family to adjust to my mom's feelings of constant worry and fear. And that's why I grew up in an extremely strict household. She set strict rules and regulations. Did I break them? Yes. But there's a reason behind that, She just always felt like something bad was going to happen to me. And that's a type of anxiety disorder. It's almost a little bit like separation anxiety disorder, which I'll get into later in the later segments, but that's not what my mom has. She has a general anxiety disorder, and she just always felt like something bad was going to happen to me. And she just had that constant worry and fear that all, negative people surrounding me. And it took me a while to understand those fears of hers and how to cope with that and how to ease her mind and let her know that, I can't guarantee that nothing's going to happen to me. No one can really guarantee anything in life, but we found ways to cope with her anxiety and how to manage her anxiety. So just putting that out there, I wanted to quickly share my mom's story. And I'm going to now give you guys some details on some signs and symptoms of certain anxiety disorders. And there are many, many different forms of anxiety. I'm not going to list every single one because then this will be like a 2-hour podcast. And I don't know if you guys want to listen to a 2-hour podcast, but if you do, let me know in the comments because I can definitely provide that. I'm going to first share with y'all the generalized anxiety disorders. This is just general. Again, it's in the name, anxiety, that most people tend to experience, including my mom. And it's pretty much just excessive anxiety or worry. And it lasts for most days for at least 6 months. You can see it's not that temporary feeling that most of us feel, like how I feel before taking a test, or when I used to be a cheerleader, I used to get really anxious before hitting the mat. It's not that. Those are normal feelings of anxiety. This is prolonged excessive worry for at least 6 months. So really understand and grasp that for those who are listening. And some of those symptoms include feeling restless or on edge, being easily fatigued, having difficulty concentrating, having muscle tension, being irritable, again, to experience sleep problems or sleep disturbances. And for the majority of the people, or for some people, the symptoms can interfere with everyday activities such as job and school performance, and also it can affect your personal relationships. And that's just not romantic. It's also, family relationships, friendships, all of that stuff. And I remember I definitely saw this with my own mom as well. So I can 100% confirm that she did experience some of these signs and symptoms, and we did not really catch those until she went to a doctor and she was officially diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Now, the next type of anxiety disorder I want to talk about is another common anxiety disorder that I have witnessed a couple times, and it's panic disorder or panic attacks. And some of you might even experience this. And people with panic disorder have recurrent, unexpected panic attacks, which are feelings of terror that strike suddenly with no warning. So all of a sudden, you just feel immense terror. And panic attacks can also be brought on by triggers such as a feared object or situation. Now, the very first time I ever witnessed a panic attack, I remember this vividly because me witnessing another person go through that even gave me terror. And again, the severity differs from person to person. I'm just going to go based off what I witnessed. So it was when I was in elementary school, and there was this girl, and we were in the gymnasium, and it was raining super, super hard, super loud. It almost sounded like thunder, but it was raining immensely, so much rain. And all of a sudden, she's sitting next to me, and she starts hyperventilating, and she starts sweating and trembling. And again, this came out of nowhere. So exactly, I'm going to list afterwards the symptoms. She was like checking all the boxes for a panic attack. She was trembling, shaking, crying. And I remember I was scared watching her. I was like, what is going on? Like, I've never seen a panic attack. Again, I was probably like in 3rd grade, 4th grade when I witnessed this. And it was really scary to watch, because I feel also the teachers at the time, back then, mental illness wasn't a focus in schools. So the adults didn't know how to manage or handle that situation. And they were bringing her water, trying to calm her down. And then my mind goes blurry, so I don't remember what happened next. But I do vividly remember that situation, her experiencing a panic attack. And for her, the feared object or situation that triggered the panic attack was the rain. And I've actually met a couple other people too. When I mentioned the story to them, they also have said that sometimes when it rains really hard, really heavy, they also experience some a panic attack. So again, for each person, it differs. Everyone has their own set of triggers, and some of those signs and symptoms of a panic disorder are that heart palpitations, sweating, trembling, shaking, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea, and even feelings of intense doom or death. And that very last symptom, when I read that, that's exactly what I saw in that poor girl's face when she was going through that panic attack. It was like she felt like I could feel her scared. I could feel her terror within me. It even like, I felt like it almost rubbed off on me. It was so scary to witness. And I can see almost like the doom, the intense fear of doom and death in her eyes. It was so scary. And there's oftentimes a high anxiety between attacks because there's no way of knowing when the next one will happen, right? So most people who experience panic disorder, you're constantly in that constant fear or worry of like, when's my next one going to happen? So it's just like a continuous cycle. Therefore, those individuals will actively prevent a future attack by avoiding places or situations or behaviors that could possibly trigger another panic attack. So as you can see, this constant worry that one may experience, I mean, that's almost super traumatizing. You're just in a constant state of fear of not wanting to feel that immense terror. I can't even imagine, honestly, like putting myself in that person's shoe. I can feel for them, like, oh my goodness. And again, some anxiety disorders can lead to other things, and panic disorders could lead to the development of agoraphobia. And I'm going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, I'm going to explain to you guys what agoraphobia is.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome back to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. Right before the break, I had briefly mentioned about an anxiety disorder called agoraphobia. Now, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I have never heard of such phobia or disorder until I was doing my research. And after reading the symptoms and what it is, I can, on some level, relate to it. I'm not 100% sure how severe the phobia must be to be diagnosed as officially having agoraphobia. But listen to this. So agoraphobia is abnormal fear of open or public spaces. Now, in today's age, with all the crazy things happening in our world, with the constant shootings happening in the U.S. and the high sex trafficking crimes going on, I can absolutely see how someone may experience or have fear of being in open or public spaces. Because even I, including myself, after constant shootings back to back, I have gone a little wary of like going to malls and concerts and even malls. When I was Christmas shopping over the weekend, like I get a little on edge. I don't like people standing too close to me. It's a little bit of fear and worry. Like I said, I don't know how severe one must feel to officially be labeled as having agoraphobia or experiencing agoraphobia. But as I had just mentioned, I can definitely relate to this one. So some of the symptoms of someone experiencing or having agoraphobia is using public transportation, being in enclosed spaces such as movie theaters, concerts, malls, etc., standing in line or being in a crowd, being outside of the home in general alone terrifies someone. And in the most severe situation, a person can actually become housebound. Now, that's crazy to me that someone can become housebound, not because I'm looking at it negatively, but I can see why people would not want to leave their homes. I mean, especially depending where you live, there's a high rate of crime, or even if there's not crime. I'm not saying being housebound is justified by the crime rate in the city you live in. But I can definitely see why people would not want to leave their house or have the fear of using public transportation. I mean, you just never know. There's a lot of crazy things going on in the world. And that agoraphobia was one of the disorders that I'm really intrigued on, and I'm actually excited to continue to do more research and learn really on the development, what more in detail about agoraphobia, because I feel it relates to so many people in today's age, especially, like I said, with all the crazy things going on in our world. And now moving on to social anxiety disorders. And this is characterized by an intense fear of anxiety toward social or performance situations. So pretty much being in front of people or being around people. And again, all of these can be a little bit correlated. If you have social anxiety, maybe you might have agoraphobia because you have, I don't know, fear of people or fear of being around people. You don't know their intentions. So again, these are all intertwined in some shape, way, or form. And people with this disorder, social anxiety, experience extreme self-consciousness in everyday situations, and they worry that their actions will be negatively perceived by others, leading them to feeling embarrassed or humiliated. So pretty much it's the worry of people judging you and laughing at you. And according to a 2007 ADAA survey, 36% of people with social anxiety disorder experience symptoms or have been experiencing symptoms for 10 or more years before seeking help. Whoa, 10 years of going undiagnosed. I mean, I feel this is again pretty common because a lot of people downplay people's feelings of, if other people come to you feeling negative or fear or worry, it's kind of hard to really understand and grasp the other person and what they're going through and their experience and really what's going on in their head. And I'm going to be honest, I did not even know social anxiety was a thing. I've never even heard of this diagnosis until Summer Walker. So for those of you who don't know, Summer Walker, she is an R&B singer, an amazing R&B singer at that. And she actually has been very open about her social anxiety. And she explains how she doesn't like to be around a lot of people. She loves music. She loves making music, but she doesn't love everything surrounding the music industry, such as award shows, performances, concerts. So Summer Walker just went on her tour, and she named it the first and last tour for a reason. And it's because she has social anxiety. And she actually, and I was pretty upset at this at the moment, she's canceled a few of her concerts and her tour. She was going through her tour, and she canceled the Sacramento, which that's the area here we're at. And it's due to her social anxiety, and she became very selective with where she performs and how many shows she performs at. And she gained a lot of criticism, again, because people were like, oh, you don't have social anxiety, like you're just weird, or you just don't want to perform in front of people. Or people were saying, I was reading comments, people were saying, how do you have social anxiety and you can twerk on the gram, because it's very different putting yourself out there through the internet versus acting like your true self in front of a crowd of people, right? You can act, and I feel like everybody is like this. You are your true 100% self when you are alone at home in your bedroom. You are your true self there. It's hard to be your true self in front of millions of people, in front of a crowd. Again, feeling that judgment from others, feeling that criticism of others, feeling like you're going to be humiliated, embarrassed. I mean, you cannot downplay this feeling of social anxiety. And I have learned a lot about this disorder. I mean, through research, but also hearing her experience. And she even commented on the negativity she was receiving at one point. She took it to her Instagram live or Instagram story, and she had mentioned how this is the reason why people commit suicide and why the suicide rate is so high is because we tend to ignore the symptoms of someone who is mentally ill or someone who is just going through it, and that's not okay. And I hope that if you are experiencing, as I'm going through this podcast and you're experiencing, any of these symptoms, or you feel like you fall on the spectrum of some type of anxiety disorder, I wish, you find somebody to talk to. I know there's like suicide hotlines, all that stuff. So there's so many resources out there. And I just want to put that out there as I'm going through all of these disorders one by one. And I just wanted to also mention Summer Walker's example because that's how I ended up even finding out about this, because I had no idea. And I'm glad I'm learning through, other people's experiences. And the next anxiety disorder I'm going to get into is separation anxiety disorder. And this is a little bit correlated with the previous story I mentioned about my mom, how she had an intense fear and intense worry of me staying out late, and she was just always constantly thinking something bad was going to happen to me, someone was going to harm me. And that's why I grew up in a very strict household. It could also be because, I grew up in a strict traditional Mexican Catholic household. So I don't want to put my mom under that category of having separation anxiety disorder. But as I was reading this, it kind of reminded me some of the symptoms. I'm like, oh, a little bit of my mom, but we're not going to get into that right now. So people who have separation anxiety disorder have fears about being parted from people to whom they are attached. And they often worry that some sort of harm or something bad will happen to their attachment figures while they are separated. And that sentence right there, I'm going to read it to y'all again. They often worry that some sort of harm or something bad will happen to their attachment figures while they are separated. That sentence right there is what made me think my mom could have this type of disorder, but I don't really see me as an attachment figure to her. I mean, of course I'm her daughter, right? But separation anxiety is mostly found in children, in kids. But that's not to say that adults cannot be diagnosed with separation anxiety. They can have separation anxiety with other adults, with their parent, grandparent, any type of relationship. Anybody can fall under this category. But that one caught my attention right there, that specific sentence. And separation anxiety is often thought to happen, like I said, only amongst children, but any individual, doesn't matter what age, can fall under the spectrum and can be diagnosed with this disorder as well. So in this segment, we just covered agoraphobia, which is the abnormal fear of open or public spaces, social anxiety disorder, which is the intense fear of social or performance situations, such as Summer Walker's experience, and separation anxiety disorder, which is the fear of being parted from your attachment figure. And we're going to cut into another quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to share with you guys what selective mutism is.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. Right before the break, I was sharing with you guys about separation anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, and social anxiety disorder. And I want to hear from you guys too. Let me know in the comments if you guys experience some type of anxiety disorder and what you do to cope with it and, you know, your experiences. I love connecting with you guys and your stories, and I want to learn more about anxiety because, again, I only experience a temporary feeling of worry. So I want to learn from you guys, learn about your stories, and, you know, it helps to hear from another, and we can help heal in that way. So let's get into selective mutism. Also, let me know in the comments if you've ever heard of this type of disorder, because I'm going to let you guys know in a minute my first time hearing about selective mutism. And this is a somewhat rare disorder associated with anxiety. So pretty much it occurs when people fail to speak in specific social situations despite having normal language skills. So they're perfectly capable of speaking. It's just they're selective with whom and where they speak to. And it usually occurs before the age of 5, so it's diagnosed in the early years for the little ones, and is often associated with extreme shyness, fear of social embarrassment, compulsive traits, withdrawal, clinging behavior, and temper tantrums. Now, the very first time I heard of selective mutism was when I was watching an episode of World of Dance. And there was a group of, I believe, 8-year-olds who came on the stage, a cute little dance group. And there was this girl in the very center stage. Her name was Naya. And J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, asked Naya a question, and her dance mate, I guess it's called, her dance mate answered, and she said, Naya has a rare condition called selective mutism. So she only speaks to specific people. She doesn't like speaking in front of large crowds. And this girl was completely silent, and it was really cute because she had the support of all her dance mates. They explained to the judges, you know, she has selective mutism. she does not speak in certain situations, but we're here to help or not help her, but to support her. And it was just really cute the way they were supporting this little 8-year-old girl. And even JLo got tears to her eyes. And that was the very first time I heard about this condition. So that's why I wanted to include it in today's episode, because that's when I later found out it does fall under some type of anxiety. And research at the Selective Mutism Anxiety Research and Treatment Center indicates that there is a proportion of children with selective mutism who come from bilingual/multilingual families, have either spent time in a foreign country and or have been exposed to another language during their formative language development. Now, that was super interesting to me, and that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to use the same example from the world of dance. That girl, Naya, she is Middle Eastern descent. And I can totally see how a large proportion of children who have selective mutism how that can develop growing up in a bilingual or multilingual family. And I myself grew up in a bilingual family. I first learned Spanish and then I learned English at school. And I had a little bit of fear. After a while learning English, my English got better than my Spanish, and I had a fear. I literally did not like going to family social events or family parties because I had a fear of speaking Spanish because I did not want to get made fun of. And I can totally see how kids can develop selective mutism. And maybe I'm not saying, I'm not trying to say that was maybe the girl's trigger or whatever of Naya's, but she is of Middle Eastern descent. I don't know her background. I don't know if she grew up in that country. I don't know really exactly how her language development was in her formative years, which happens between the ages of 2 and 4. But I just thought that was so interesting, and I can understand how growing up in a bilingual family or home can add additional stress of, speaking another language and being insecure with those skills. That is enough to cause an increased anxiety level and mutism. And I can back this up because I have experienced that type of anxiety when I go to family events and I feel like my Spanish isn't up to par, especially because that was my first learned language, and a lot of my aunts and my grandma, they only speak Spanish. So then I internalized as like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I speak the language? But it's just real for me. It was just more like I just have to be more confident. And now my Spanish is like as what's the word I'm looking for? My Spanish is just as great as my English. So just want to put that out there. But I just thought that fact was super interesting. I can totally see how growing up in a bilingual, multilingual home environment or growing up in a foreign country can later on develop into selective mutism for certain kids. And I want to now share some treatment options, therapy maybe. Again, I hope if you're listening to this podcast and you are not diagnosed or you feel like you may fall under one of these categories, I highly suggest looking out for some way, shape, or form to cope, manage the anxiety you're experiencing. If it's prolonged anxiety, as I said, generalized anxiety disorder is 6 months or longer. Not to say that, if you only experience anxiety for 4 months, it's not valid. That's not what I'm saying. But just get help, talk to people. There are support groups out there. Most anxiety disorders are generally treated with medication or with psychotherapy, which is talk therapy. So going to a therapist. My mom uses medication. I know many other people who are on medication for their anxiety. As I just mentioned, there are also support groups that could also be highly beneficial when dealing with anxiety, whether that be like an in-person support group or through the internet. And again, I feel like the internet could be a good safe space depending on what you're talking about. Many YouTubers, celebrities, people just on the internet in general have expressed their mental health journeys and how they cope with those type of disorders, mental conditions. And because I'm a big YouTuber, I love watching YouTube. I learn a lot of great skills through YouTube, and I love learning about other people's opinions, or not opinions, but just their stories in general. And that's how listening to other people and their journeys, that's why I learned about selective mutism, and I've learned about social anxiety disorder, like through Summer Walker. So I feel like depending how you use the internet, it can really be educational and helpful, depending again how you use it and what type of content you engage in. And just a disclaimer, any advice received over the internet should be used with caution, all right? With a grain of salt. Just because, let me see. What's a popular YouTuber? I don't know. Say your favorite YouTuber tells you, I use this medication or I did this, and you know, you don't need to follow their exact steps, but you can definitely take it into consideration. I think one of the best ways to learn and about people's mental health journeys is by communication and by human connection, and that's how people are able to heal one another. And I was a communication major, so I'm big on like people and that human contact relationship. I'm big on that, and I feel like that can help you in your mental health journey as well. There are also stress management techniques. Meditation as well can be another option to cope with anxiety. And all of this to say, it's all about finding the best option for you, what works best for you. Always consult with your doctor, right? Like I said, just because Sally and Joe told you to follow this path, they're not, they don't have the credentials to really tell you what path to follow or what ways you can cope or deal with your anxiety. So I just wanted to put that out there. And like I said, if you are someone who is dealing with anxiety, try to find someone you can talk to, or even me. I mean, I'm an open book. I love connecting with you guys. So you guys can always comment under the comments in the comment section. I said comments like 3 times. But yeah, just talk to somebody, talk to me. Again, my Instagram is CynLizCon, CYNLIZCON, CynLizCon. And you can talk to me through there. Let me know if you listen to this podcast. And I think on that note, it's going to wrap up today's episode. And I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's podcast. Again, I just felt it was very necessary for me to talk about anxiety and the different anxiety disorders, especially during this time of year, especially that Christmas is coming in a couple days. I mean, I know many people are probably feeling these intense worries and fears of meeting with family or, going to so many holiday parties or whatever the case may be. I just felt it was very necessary to talk about it, and I want to let you guys know you are not alone. I am here for you. There are support groups out there. There are resources out there. Just research, consult with a doctor, all that good stuff. And again, thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. If you like today's episode, let me know in the comments. Give it a like, share, all that good stuff. And I wish you all a happy, a healthy, and a very Merry Christmas.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.